As I mentioned recently, and I'm going to repeat, not because I'm nagging, but because I've been reminded that sometimes it takes a couple of times for things to sink in, that I read a couple of weeks ago that paragraph from the general instruction about the content of the sermon and how it is either from the scriptures or from a text of the Mass. And so it's perfectly legitimate. And I'm not going to do the exercise often of rationalizing where in the Mass I'm coming from just to prove it. But for the sake of charity, not that I need to do so, but out of charity, if you'd like me to springboard this Sunday, I'm springboarding off of the memento for the dead in the Roman canon, where we remember and then pray for our beloved dead. So that's the text of the Mass I'm going to be commenting on today. And in particular, I want to comment on it from the perspective of how we deal with this loss. Because the fact is that unless you are extremely young and sheltered, everyone has already lost people in their lives, and we are going to continue to do so. Because no matter what the brainwashing of our society is, you cannot avoid death. You can avoid taxes, maybe, but you cannot avoid death, right? It's not possible. And so, therefore, if you cannot avoid it, the most reasonable thing would be to be prepared for it. To be prepared. We're going to, or we have lost loved ones in our lives, and we must remember this from the Christian perspective, because, like I said, there is the brainwashing that either avoids thinking about it at all, pretending like we aren't going to die, acting like we're not going to die, doing everything to flee from death, or if you prefer the French, vol de mort, or we can devolve into a kind of paganism. Pick your paganism, whichever one. The one that's most close is the Santa Muerte, that's very popular among a lot of Mexicans, which is a demonic idol and parody of Our Lady of Guadalupe. But it's one of those ways of dealing with death that we should not do because it's not healthy. We have to accept this fact. If nothing else, again, because it's reality. There's a reason why we say things like, and you can't avoid death and taxes. Like, it's a common saying for a reason. It's a reality which we are familiar with and that we can't run away from. And therefore, we need to accept it. Not necessarily happily, but we have to accept it. We have to recognize it is a penalty of sin. I should say a consequence of sin. It is a reality that we have to deal with, and it is somehow in God's providence. Now, someone, I don't think so, anyone here necessarily, but someone might say, well, Father, you obviously haven't lost anyone. Now, let me tell you, because I'm going to, okay? Particularly, now, I will say, I didn't grow up close to my extended family due to being a military brat and other things like that. So I didn't really know my immediate family or my extended family very well. So I didn't really mourn the loss of my grandparents, etc. We just were never very close. So it was many years before I ended up experiencing this grief. When I was a second year, or maybe the summer after my first year of seminary, I believe it was, I was assigned to Our Lady of Victory up in Paris as a seminarian there. And I got a phone call from my dad that Ryan Hinojosa had died in a car accident. Ryan was the younger brother of one of my friends. Eric was more of a younger brother to me, and so Ryan was really, really a younger brother. I was a mentor to him, etc. In Scouts, he was an altar server. I swore him in when he joined the army, etc., etc. He died in a car accident, not his fault, but God rest him, he's gone. And because of how distressed I was, because I had not lost anyone before, and I knew that Ryan had been struggling with sins, I asked Therese for a rose as a sign that he was all right. And 2 or 3 days later, I was serving the funeral of Father Love's wife. He was not a priest back then. Father Love's wife. And as they were loading the casket into the hearse, a rose fell at my feet. And so I was able to take that down and give it to his mother. That, of course, was a great consolation. I don't recommend trying that all the time because we don't want to put God to the test. I happen to need it, and I think the reason it was given to me was because God knew I would take it to his mother, who probably really needed something. So, yeah. So I took that down to his mother. And over the years, while I'm still sad about this, the remembrance of Ryan, it's been many years now, and I don't feel the loss as much because I've dealt with it healthily. I mention him in every Mass in the Memento. I say Mass for him on his anniversary of his death. This past year, we did so in Poland. And so I am still sad at the loss, but I've dealt with it in a good, proper spiritual way. Fast forward a number of years, I'm assigned to Buffalo at St. Catery's. And as always, I always try to mentor the young men who need it. One of those was Francisco Saldana, who, after I left the parish, so this was about 2 years ago now, well, 2.5 now, he got in a car accident. His fault. Wear your bloody seatbelts, people, okay? Anyway, he was in an accident, was basically a vegetable for 2 months. I got to see him a few times. He did receive the sacraments. I did pray with him. He eventually died 2 months later. That one also hit me really hard. And same thing. I pray for Francisco in the memento. I say Mass on his anniversary. And I have a picture around where whenever I see it, I can remember to pray for him. That is a lot fresher of a wound. It's still kind of there. Well, it's not kind of there. It's still there, but it's there a bit more deeply than Ryan, because it's more recent. But as I go back, so again, I've gone back on each of the anniversaries of his death, and I say Mass at St. Catery's as my formal parish for the family. And last time, as I was preaching, the theme that I spoke about was the recognition that Francisco does not belong to me, did not belong to me. And again, as a little caveat, I'll try to not do so defensively. I'm sorry if people don't understand this yet about priests, but we're human, and these relationships matter to us, especially when it's our children that we're close to, and that we often are fathers to in a very direct way. And so I had to reflect on this and deal with my grief on this. And I was preaching to the family about the fact that what I've had to come to accept is the fact that Francisco did not belong to me. He did in a way, just like he belonged to his mother, et cetera, but still not completely mine, just like anyone in my life. As I'm preaching this, I look over and Rocio, his mother, is kind of nodding because Francisco, God rest him, is the one who brought his family back to the church. He's the one that walked to youth group from his house. He's the one that walked to Sunday Mass, evading dogs occasionally to get there, right? And eventually, he got back in the practice. So now his mother and his siblings, et cetera, are going to Mass regularly and active in the faith. And so it was very good to see Rocio nodding, like she understood. And she talked to me afterwards and confirmed, yeah, I kind of have come to that conclusion as well. And so I definitely want to encourage that particular line of thought. Again, for those of you who have lost or will lose someone in your life, no one in our life belongs to us completely. They are on loan. And therefore, we should be grateful for the time we have and not ungrateful and resentful for the loss. Now, please grieve. You need to grieve, okay? A lot of the problems people have is they don't grieve properly, right? So I'm definitely encouraging you to go through the tissues, but humbly recognizing that fact. Another aspect of that humility, which is very important, is in a more general way to recognize God's providence, right? All of the evil in the world, including a grave loss like that, is somehow going to work out for God's glory. It's going to hurt now, but somehow God is going to work through that. If you have any doubts ever about that, look right there. Okay? Somehow, in his providence, this is going to work. Now, I'm going to give you an example, a theory with Ryan and Francisco. May be completely wrong, may be completely right, but at least it gives you an idea of what I'm talking about. It is possible that God called them early for the fact that they may not have made it if they had continued living. By made it, I mean to heaven. You know, the fact that Francisco was in a vegetative state for 2 months might have given him lots of time for a lot of active contritions and rosaries, you know, that he would not have otherwise said before dying. I don't know, but it's a thought, right? Just to understand that somehow in God's plan this works. The other thing is, the effect that this has, even though it hurts, may be the kind of effect that someone needs to come back to the practice of their faith. That they're self-reliant, and it's not until they get hit by something this hard that they realize, I actually need God because I can't handle this by myself. Right? So again, just some examples of some of the potential providence of God that may be there. Again, the humility before the providence of God to recognize that this may be, this is part of his plan, and that we need to, even if we don't understand it, accept it. And the last thing I'd like to emphasize is, again, a truth, an intellectual truth, which we need to assimilate into our hearts so that it can help regulate all of the passions involved with the loss like this or otherwise. You might love a lot of people. You may love your spouse, hopefully. You may love your parents. You may love your children, et cetera, et cetera. As I said, they are all gifts of God. Now, we may not think that our spouses or children are gifts of God sometimes, but they are, okay? But God loves your dead father, your dead mother, your dead spouse, your dead children, your dead friends, infinitely more than you do. Infinitely more than you do. And if we love them, why would we not want them to be with him? Now, we can't judge. We don't know where everyone goes. We, in charity, assume that they're in purgatory, and then we offer a lot of prayers for them. But God loves us individually, every single one of us, infinitely more. And if it hurts for that loss, that's okay. He's been there. His mama's been there, right? We can survive, but we have to do so as Christians, okay? In hope, in faith, in prayer, in trust, in humility, and surrender to God's will. It's not easy, but as Glenn said to me once, if I wanted it easy, I would be a Protestant.